Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Welcome back, Phil. Did you have a good holiday?
Yeah, very good holiday, yeah. A few things happened whilst I was away.
Yeah, well, certainly in regards to sporting events, international events, politics, it was all kicking off whilst you were away.
Kicking off in more ways than one, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But, luckily I was in Greece and not Spain.
Yeah.
With the Spain winning the Wimbledon, and then obviously kicking us out of the Euros final, and a slight thing happening over in the US as well. So yeah, it was all kicking off in more ways than one wants it. But
it certainly was, and I noticed you were still on your LinkedIn and Instagram feeds, sharing stuff from the automotive world.
Yes, I have my opportunities for downtime. I like to keep abreast of things, but yes, keep on top of things whilst I'm away. But there's a slight difference doing it whilst sat in the sun with a cold beer or wine in your hand, isn't there?
Definitely. The world looks different.
It does. It certainly does. So no, but thank you, and we must thank Carl Davis again for sitting in for us, who I know he joined you previously on another one of my holidays, and then jumped in for your seat more recently, but again jumped in for me again last week. So a huge shout out to Carl, and I know he takes it very seriously and does really enjoy it from his very well equipped office studio that he has as well.
Yeah, no, had a great time with Carl last week, and he really did enjoy himself. And so he is kind of on the subs bench. Whenever you or I decide to go on holiday, he's there on the subs bench on speed dial.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Carl, if you're listening this morning, for jumping in for us there.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer, AM and Fleet News. And we've got a theme going this week, with the first half of the show looking at used car supermarkets that are making the news, starting with Big Motoring World acquires 3 CarShop sites from Sytner, while Sytner confirms the completion of the rebranding of the remaining 9 CarShop sites as Sytner Select. Motorpoint rebounds after a miserable 2023 with a strong Q1 sales growth. Online used car dealer Cinch announces launch into physical sites. And then in the second half, the DFT confirms the ICE ban will be brought forward once again to 2030. Mon Motors expands in the West Country with VW Group acquisitions from Heritage Automotive, and 40 jobs go at Ken Brown Motors following 2 Hyundai site closures.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And just to give it a little bit of sort of insight into what's been happening with the supplier specials, the companies recently featured in our new series of supplier specials include Checkwick, who are the new Danish firm rolling out self-service tech for after-sales departments across the UK. Also, we've had AutoChat, who are the automotive tech specialists using AI to help dealers to automate elements of their customer contact. And both episodes can also be found on your usual podcast feed. But if you do like to have a conversation and you'd like to profile your business, then please do get in touch with Curtis or myself at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. yahoo.com. That's motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So, first headline this week comes from Car Dealer, and the headline is Big Motoring World completes deal for used car supermarket sites from axed CarShop brand. So, this story, it's been bubbling under for the last week or so, and this was actually confirmed in a press release issued by Big Motoring World this week. So the confirmation is that it's completed the purchase of 3 sites from Sytner. So these are the 3 CarShop sites. And Car Dealer reported last week that the Kent-based outfit, Big Motoring World, was in talks over multiple premises as a result of Sytner pulling the plug on the CarShop brand, which we'll cover actually in the next story. But this is an interesting one because this sees the acquisition of premises in Norwich, Sheffield, and Camberley. So very much adding to that national spread that Big Motoring World has certainly been focused on over the last 12 months or so. And that gives it bigger footprint, new geographical locations, and very much part of its stated intention. And this, of course, follows hot on the heels of various comings and goings at Big Motoring World. It's been reported widely how Peter Waddell, the founder and boss of Big Motoring World, exited the company in April in a move which is currently still subject to High Court action, so that's still got to play out, and that the full trial is still likely to take place later this year. But interestingly, I mean, one of the things that really caught my eye in this particular story is that Lawrence Vaughan, who's the executive chairman of Big Motoring World, is now the CEO of Big Motoring World. And of course, Lawrence Vaughan will be known to many listeners from his days as the chief exec of Sytner. So I rather suspect that the conversations between Big Motoring World and Sytner must have been a lot easier because of that, because Lawrence knows the key people there. These sites were up for sale, and I should imagine it was concluded fairly swiftly.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I know, obviously, following the initial announcement that Sytner were exiting from some of their CarShop sites, then it was always a hot rumour across the sector who was going to move in to those operations, who was going to take advantage of those readily available sites, and to a point, the staff there as well, because they have taken on 170 employees as part of the acquisition that will now be part of the Big Motoring World business. But yeah, very interesting there, because Lawrence is quoted in the story saying that the CarShop acquisition will take the group to turnover to more than 1 billion on an annualized basis, approximately doubling since 2022, and represents a huge step towards achieving their medium term plans, and that they've managed to substantially grow big whilst delivering strong profits in a market that many competitors have found extremely challenging, is what's been commented in the story there. So it is interesting that they've moved very quickly, haven't they, in terms of these acquisitions, whilst, as you mentioned there, Curtis, other things were taking place within the Big Motoring World empire. But yeah, it's great news in terms of this growth of Big Motoring World, because it was always questionable as to I know Pete Waddell talked obviously about growth a long time ago when we interviewed him previously on the podcast, didn't but more importantly, there's been this staff retention of those CarShop sites as well. So a great move from these guys on that.
Yeah, and it's all happened fairly quickly because the Sheffield and Norwich sites actually opened last week, and the newly completed Camberley site, Camberley in Surrey, will Camberley and Hampshire, sorry,
Yeah.
will follow later in the year. So that's 3 sites up and running in fairly short time. So an interesting strategic move there, and closely tied with our next story, also from Car Dealer, where the headline is Sytner completes the rebrand of 9 CarShop used car supermarkets. So if you're wondering what was happening to the rest of the group
Yes.
after those 3 disposals, well, they've been rebranded as Sytner Select, and they're actually up and running already.
Yes, as you say there, they've the Sytner have opened its 9th Sytner Select used car store, and that's happened this week. So they were saying that the work has been completed on rebranding the used car supermarkets. They are retaining, and that they're saying that Darren Edwards, who's the CEO, has reported to Car Dealer that the future is very bright. So, as you say there, Curtis, that I know initially when they were doing the restructuring, they announced obviously the removal of some of those CarShop sites. That the plan was to retain the site, some of those operations, but rebrand them, move them closer to their franchise network or where they could do it. So, again, a very strategic and smart move for them in this current market where we know that supply is constrained in many ways.
Yeah, and it's worth just emphasising that Sytner only acquired the CarShop business back in 2017, and at the time, CarShop, certainly one of the biggest used car supermarkets in the country, and it was, I think, Sytner were pretty much the first franchise group to acquire an independent business, and we've seen after that, certainly since 2017, a number of other big franchise groups either acquiring or opening up their own used car businesses. And there's quite an interesting quote from Darren Edwards within the story, because he says this will give the group 9 Sytner Select approved used car supercentres, which will be supplied by our franchise dealerships' surplus part exchanges. So that's where the vehicles are coming from. And he goes on to say, which, given the group's scale, negates the need to buy cars from auctions and other external sources. So very much self-sufficient there.
Yeah, definitely, and it is cited within the story that they have retained the Leighton Buzzard preparation centre, which I believe is will be fully up and running again from the 29th of this month, which is going to be under the banner of Sytner Logistics Centre, which was the big prep centre that really supported the CarShop prep. So yeah, I mean it's kind of a very swift move now that they've moved forward with this under that rebrand. They say they've everything's now fully rebranded, up and running, and operational very quickly.
And completing our look at car supermarkets, the next headline is from AM Online, and the headline is Motorpoint rebounds after challenging 2023 with strong Q1 retail sales growth. So, I mean, we reported on this, didn't we, Phil? 2023 was miserable
Not a
for
great year.
Motorpoint.
Yes.
No, it wasn't. And I think at the time Motorpoint described it as pretty much the worst year that they'd had on record. But encouraging news is that Q1 has actually started. Q1 of this year has actually started really well. So this is the months April to June. And the company is saying it's expecting, pretty good results on the back of improved supply of new car registrations and an expansion of the used car market.
Yeah, no, I think as you say there, they've gone through a little bit of pain over recent years, haven't they? And it's good to see that they've got that under control a little bit. I know they've done quite a bit of restructuring. They've done a little bit of obviously their vehicle profiling restructuring, but I think, to your point, they've now got a little bit more control in terms of product supply coming back into the business. They did see the damage, didn't they, from the car demand, particularly in that sort of 0 to 4-year-old marketplace. So, yeah, it's good to see that the Q1 figures is kind of showing a turnaround, a U-turn in the opposite direction for Motorpoint.
Yeah, and within the story, they do actually quote Mark Carpenter, the CEO of Motorpoint, who says that the priorities for the year ahead include strengthening vehicle supply, pushing ahead with consumer digital engagement, using data to inform decision making, and the introduction of new profit channels. And he also goes on to say that the new store program, which was pretty much on hold, looks as though it could be activated again for the 2025 full year due to the return of more positive market conditions. So certainly a much more upbeat sounding Motorpoint there.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, they're citing that they have got that appetite to go back on the expansion and new sites again, because that did slow down during their challenging period.
Yeah, and next story from Car Dealer. The headline is Cinch launching used car dealerships across the UK with first one on former Kazoo sites. So this is a report that online used car retailer Cinch is to open 4 sites with more to follow. The first one will launch next week on a former Kazoo site in Northampton, with others following in Birmingham, Bristol and Manchester over the course of the next couple of months and rest of the year. And interesting development there from Cinch, who were very much in the online world and now looking at omnichannel and physical sites.
Yeah, and it seems to have sparked up the whole Kazoo conversation again, hasn't it? Where this again, looking at it, where a digital only operation in the form of Cinch has gone physical, and it's going to be interesting to see how the retailers, the dealers who supply vehicles through Cinch, they now react to this, I suppose, in many ways. Is where they may have been a bit sort of 50-50, are they a competitor, are they not a competitor with their retail operation? But actually, does this say to those retailers that have product on the Cinch platform, actually these are now physical competitors with you as a motor retailer? So it's going to be interesting, but it certainly sparked the Kazoo conversation again.
Yeah, it's it won't go away, will it? So I'm sure we'll be hearing more.
Definitely.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
Well, heading over to Fleet News, and Curtis mentioned this at the start of the show, that the DFT has confirmed the ban on the sale of new fossil fuel cars from 2030. Now, interestingly, we were talking before we recorded that this hasn't really been picked up by much of the trade media, because we know that it was lightly mentioned in the Labour's manifesto that there would be a potential plan to move the 2035 ban back to 2030, following the earlier U-turn from 2030 back to 2035. But yeah, it seems that Fleet News have actually contacted DFT themselves to confirm, is it happening? And they've confirmed to them that yes, they will be reversing that ban back to 2030, which makes it quite interesting when you start talking about the Z mandate, doesn't it?
It does, yes, yeah. And I mean, this was flagged up in the Labour Party manifesto, so we knew this was their intention once they came into power. And you're right, Fleet News have got that confirmation now from the DFT, and the DFT told Fleet News it intends to publish further details in due course, which is just as well because we don't actually know where vans stand in this because it's just mentioned ICE cars will be brought forward to 2030. So we don't know about vans, we don't know about plug-in hybrids or mild hybrids. So there's more clarifications due on this. But in terms of the ZEV mandate, I guess we're back to where we were, aren't we, effectively?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, that's the big question with this. That there's been so much pressure on the scale and speed of the benchmarks within the ZEV mandate, which has obviously been clearly spoken about by some of the OEMs and their view of the UK government and the expectations. But that was kind of the question. It was always questionable initially with the 2030 deadline, but then when it got pushed to 2035, they didn't align very well. The Z mandate seemed to be accelerating very quickly ahead of the 2035 deadline. So this unfortunately does bring the Z mandate back in line with how it was initially set up. Now, the big question in all of this is, will the new government do anything with the Z mandate based
Yeah.
on the pressure from the OEMs? Have they got an intention? Because that has not been mentioned at all in any of the manifestos or communications.
Yeah, and I think we can safely assume that the trade bodies like the SMMT and NFDA are lobbying for this clarity, and it will be interesting to see how this develops over the coming months, and if we have got more clarity on the ZEV mandate and what's covered in the ban.
Yeah, and more importantly, what will it do? Because I think there was, an assumption that when the 2030 to 35 U-turn came in, the acceleration of particularly private registrations plateaued. Now, was it just coincidence that it had reached a point of absorption from that private, or was it that the consumer felt that they had another 5 years to make their decision
Yeah.
to transition to EV? Does this cause more confusion, or does it then now to return to that acceleration towards the transition for the private consumer who are not necessarily transitioning to EV as quickly as obviously fleet are? So big questions on this one as to what it will do when they do officially push it out, because as you say, the communication hasn't necessarily been pushed out by the DFT directly to the wider consumer market.
Yeah, I suspect this is a story we're going to be returning to, aren't we?
I believe it will. Yes, we'll watch this one closely.
Yeah. Next headline is from AM Online, and it's Mon Motors expands with takeover of 7 Volkswagen Group showrooms. So this is Mon Motors, who are based in a family-run business based in South Wales. They've actually been around a long time. They were established in 1971. And they've actually acquired several sites from Salisbury-based Heritage Automotive. So the group has taken over Bristol Skoda, Bristol Cupra, and Bristol Volkswagen, plus Gloucester Cupra and Gloucester Skoda, Volkswagen Western-Supermare, and Cheltenham Audi. So that's a sizable Volkswagen group cluster of dealers in the southwest, and it's a good acquisition. Fits in very well with Mon Motors representation, and certainly increases their present representation with the Volkswagen Group. So certainly a very, very good acquisition there.
No, and it is cited that Mon Motors is 51st position in the AM100 currently, and that the deal is likely to move them its past Yeomans and Porsche retail into the first half of the ranking. So again, great acquisition there, and obviously now that shows it's already got the as you say the three Audi, Skoda, Seat, two VW, and the Ford and Volvo sites as well. So again, a great deal, a great acquisition. But what this does show is where now we talk a lot recently around the brand's realignment with partners, and you kind of look at this and see, is this part of that strategic play from the OEMs of who they want as their partners representing their brands? Is there going to be more from this? Will Heritage retain some of the remaining Volkswagen sites that they've got left, or will they go? And because it's sort of odd, really, isn't it, that you've got one group expanding their VW, but you've got another group that's left with fewer VW representation outlets. So it's going to be one to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, because it does leave Heritage Automotive with one Audi dealership in Salisbury, Volkswagen dealerships across Dorchester, Salisbury and Yeovil, and one Skoda dealership in Yeovil. But outside of the VW group, it also represents Honda. It's got an Ineos showroom in Dorchester and Gloucester, as well as several motorcycle outfits. So it is going to be interesting to see what Heritage does in the future in terms of representation.
Yeah. So I suspect we'll hear a little bit more from probably Mon Motors and Heritage, I suspect, in due course as those franchises start to realign further. But we'll keep a close eye on that. And our final story of today is another one. We're going over to Car Dealer, and this is 40 jobs to go as Ken Brown Motors shuts 2 Hyundai dealerships. And this is that they've announced the closure of both Richmond and Letchworth Hyundai sites, and saying that it's uncertainly over the Richmond location had made it unviable for them, and that has led to the knock-on effect for the Letchworth dealership as well. So together, it's meant that the group hadn't met Hyundai's multi-site objective. Now, this is quite an interesting one, because you were saying, obviously, there's a little bit of background behind the Richmond site, isn't there, and the problems they were facing down there.
Yeah, and this is on the back of Hyundai's national network termination in May. Now, as we know, the various manufacturers, they every few years they terminate the network and then reappoint, and depending on what strategic direction they were going in. But I think the timing of this probably couldn't have been worse for Ken Brown Motors, because the Richmond site was affected by there were traffic roadworks outside of the dealership, which saw a drop in footfall and caused problems with staff access, and that kind of compounded the matter. And meanwhile, Ken Brown Motors were looking for alternative sites, but I think by this story, it looks though that the timings were just against Ken Brown Motors in that they were effectively losing one site. Hyundai partners with multi-site partners, so it left Ken Brown Motors vulnerable, I think. And this is what happened. And it's a sad conclusion to this story that 40 jobs have been lost and 2 sites have been closed as a result. But Ken Brown Motors continues. It does have representation with Kia, so hopefully we'll be hearing more of them in the future.
Yeah, exactly. There is a statement in the piece from John Taylor, who's the managing director of Ken Brown Motors, saying that they've had a good relationship with Hyundai and they've been very supportive during the road closure. However, the uncertainty of both sites means that it's no longer viable for them, that they will continue an excellent relationship with Kia that they've got in Stevenage and in Harlow, and they will seek new opportunities to fill the gap that this closure of the two Hyundai sites has left them with. So again, they're not saying they're walking away entirely, that they are looking at alternative opportunities that this now presents them. So it's been a busy week already in the industry, Curtis.
Yeah, you go on holiday for a week, you come back, and the world's moved on. And even allowing for summer and people being away on holidays, there's plenty of stories kicking around. And drawing up the list for this week, it was very much sort of cherry picking the stories, because there were quite a few more that we could have covered. So maybe we'll address them next week, although I suspect next week will be busy as well. So who knows?
We weren't affected by the IT issue, were we? So we're okay.
No. Thankfully. Touching wood.
Yes, exactly. So again, lots to cover there, lots to get through, lots of acquisitions still taking place at the midpoint of the 2024. So, and again, we'll start to sort of hear what happens with the rest of the remaining CarShop sites.
But that's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.